Hello, everyone. Okay, my lights are off. Okay, sorry, guys. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of Hot Topics. If you are unfamiliar with this show, let me tell you what this show is about. This is the show. I'm sorry. I get easily distracted. So this is a show where we like to have those real conversations. We like to have those kitchen table conversations, the conversation that you only talk about with like three of your friends. Well, we like to take those conversations and put it all out there in the open. I'm sorry, it was a fly. All for the purpose of education and learning, as this podcast is a production of A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. So we've done episodes on homeschooling, we've done financial security, a child of divorce. What else have we done? A bazillion episodes about living with disabilities. So we cover a wide range here on Hot Topics, and today is no different. So let me tell you what's going to happen today. So today I'm excited about this episode because we have a repeat topic, you guys. I love it when we have repeat topics because we like to look at multiple ways at one thing, right? There's multiple perspectives. What do I say? There's multiple ways to see one thing. That's what I'm trying to say. So, with that said, we are bringing a topic back, you guys. And that topic that we're bringing back is, what is a podcast, right? We are continuing this discussion about what is it? Why is it so popular? Is it for everybody? It seems to be taking over the world. I don't know. It's just me. Last year, I was just like, well, if everyone else has a podcast, well, screw it. I want a podcast. And so here we are. Okay, so all right. So, what is a podcast? We are bringing that back, you guys. And I have a guest with me who's going to help me with this discussion. I would like to apologize in advance because I know I'm going to butcher her name. Her name is I gotta roll the R's. Hold on. Maribel Quezada Smith. I'm so sorry. Maribel Quezada Smith. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. But that is her name. And she is going to help me with this discussion today. So I think I'm just going to get right to it. Who is Maribel Quezada Smith? Let me tell you who she is. So Maribel is a bilingual video and podcast producer, as well as a host and speaker with over 16 years of expertise developing meaningful content. Her TV credits include producing on shows for the Discovery family of networks, Netflix, Oxygen, and A&E, among others. She's currently a producer and co-host of the popular Pulso podcast. Maribel is the co-founder of BIPOC Podcast Creators, an organization devoted to amplifying the voices, and stories of people of color. She regularly shares her expertise on topics like this around global stages. Today, she helps entrepreneurs, startups, and growing brands build deeper connections with their ideal customers through meaningful video and audio content. Fabulous. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and bring Maribel to the stage right now.
Hi.
Hey, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. And you did a good job. I will just say, I would correct you slightly. So it's Maribel. And then my first last name is pronounced Quesada, like quesadilla.
Quesada. So
Yes.
Maribel Quesada Smith. All right, awesome. All right, so Maribel, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate you taking the time to be here.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Gabrielle.
Awesome. All right, so we're continuing the discussion about what is a podcast. So I wanted to have you tell your story about why you got into podcasting, what do you get from it, all that jazz. Your bio says you've been in it for 16 years, so that's so obviously you love it, you know. So I just wanted to have you tell your story about why you got into podcasting and all that jazz.
Of course. So I've been in video production for over 16 years, and I started podcasting in 2008. I started just kind of like experimenting back before hosting companies were a real thing, and it was hard to actually write RSS feeds, which is what you need to distribute a podcast right now. So it was a challenging effort for me, and it kind of discouraged me from continuing podcasting for a while. So I did it for a few months, and then I kind of fell off from podcasting, and I went back to the video world and stayed there for a few years. Then I went back and a few years later and I created my podcast Diferente, which is a bilingual podcast where we explore the complexities of living life between two or more cultures. Now that podcast is seasonal, and right now I'm taking a bit of a hiatus so that I can co-produce and also co-host on another podcast called Pulso, and that's by Project Pulso. It's an amazing organization that celebrates and tells the untold stories of Latinos in the United States. And we hear, we usually tell stories on Pulso that you don't necessarily hear in the mainstream. So that's one of our biggest goals and focuses. So that's what I've been doing in podcasting as of late.
So what I know you say you're taking a hiatus, but what is your goal? Everyone has a goal with podcasting, right? There's some kind of message that they're trying to get out there. What is your goal? What do you hope to achieve?
Well, though I'm taking a hiatus from Diferente, I'm not taking a hiatus from podcasting. I'm still producing and co hosting on Pulso, and I'm consulting on other podcasts as well. My goal, I would say, for Pulso right now, for the podcast that I'm on in this moment, is to continue to spread the stories of Latinos and continue to tell more stories that show the experience of being a Latino in the United States is actually very multifaceted and very diverse in itself. Not just we're all not the same, right? We're not a monolith. And I think that's a challenge that we are now embracing as creators, especially when we're creators of color. We're really challenged and tasked to tell the stories that go beyond the stereotypes. And that's something that I'm very passionate about.
Mm. So, like, is there is there a story that you recall, of like a favorite story or something that resonated with you the most?
Of all the people that I've interviewed, oh, that's a good question because I've interviewed a lot of people, but some of the stories that resonate with me the most, I would say, are the ones that have challenges that people don't necessarily understand. For example, I actually talked to a friend who was a dreamer. She was brought to the United States when she was very young. I think she was like 3 years old, and then was raised in the United States. But because she was brought to the United States undocumented, she was never able to really live here as a documented citizen, and that way that's what caused her to have a lot of trouble through college. So she was able to go to college in the United States, and unfortunately after she graduated with honors, she had to leave and she had to go back to Mexico and try to figure out her life there and start a career there, which was very difficult because she had to leave her whole family, and she had to start over in a country that she didn't really know at all. I mean, she was brought here so young, she didn't remember that country. She was more American than anything, but it's weird, right? It's like you become American, but not all the way. So then you have to go back to this country that you don't even know, but it's the only place that's left for you. And she was telling in her story, the way she told us that story and that journey, I think was very valuable to a lot of people who don't necessarily get why these dreamers have such a journey ahead, and have had such trouble and have such a challenging situation to deal with. So I think that story in particular doesn't get told enough, and I was really proud to share that.
Awesome, awesome. So, it's it's interesting that you brought up Dreamers because I have to be honest, I completely forgot about that. with all that's going on. So the fact that you brought it up, it's it's coming back into consciousness in a way, and it's making sure that people don't forget about dreamers, uh, about that. So just, I'm sorry, quickly, can you just define what is a dreamer?
Well, I don't know if I have the specific legal definition of a dreamer correctly, but a dreamer is basically someone who was brought to the United States as a very young kid. I think the United States, as of now, qualifies young kid under 12. So someone that was brought by their parents. Clearly, anyone under 12 be very difficult for them to actually come here alone. So anyone under 12 that was brought into the United States undocumented, was raised here, went to school here, learned the language, lives basically, like every other American person here, but doesn't have the legal documentation to be able to work. And so because of that, they can't really get jobs. They can't they definitely have no benefits. They can't even get scholarships to colleges. It's very, very difficult to get any kind of assistance. There are some programs that are try to help them a little bit, but in general, they're kind of left out. They're like this pocket of the population that almost like just I don't even know how to describe it. It's almost like they become the redheaded stepchild of the US, but that's a really mean thing to say, I think. I don't really like that that phrase anymore, but you know what I mean. Like I think that that might resonate with some people when I say that.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. You're saying that they're sort of like the forgotten ones. They're the, they work the hardest, maybe even harder than American citizens, and yet, they're the ones, just because they don't have, documentation, they're easily deported,
Yeah.
so
And I will say, like, I've never met a dreamer who isn't hardworking, studious, or just a person who wants to do well in general. And that's the crazy part. Like these people want to pay taxes. Like they want to be a part of society, but they're just not allowed to. And they're so American because they're embedded in the culture.
yeah, yeah. So I think, because these stories don't get told enough, and just kind of bringing it back to podcasting, and because of the internet, because of, how easy it is to make a podcast, I think it's easy for people to hear these stories. So I'm wondering if you could talk about the how easy it is to start a podcast, in terms of the technology, in terms of the internet, things like that.
So, starting a podcast is relatively easy. It's an easy barrier of entry. It's all it takes is a microphone, some headphones, and they could be of any kind, of any level. It doesn't have they don't have to be professional grade. A microphone, headphones, and a computer. That's it. If you have that, you can start a podcast. In fact, some people would argue and say that you don't need a microphone. Some people would say, just use your computer speakers or the headphones that came with your phone. You might be able to do that. I would strongly say that a microphone is the least thing that you can get because it helps a lot in the quality of your podcast. So if you have those three things, you can start. You record. You need some kind of recording software. GarageBand comes free with your computer. There are other software out there for Microsoft computers or computers that are not Mac that you can use as well that are free or come with the software. So, okay, check. You have a recording software. You have your, starting equipment. Now you need a hosting company. So, in order to distribute a podcast, you need a hosting company that can write this thing called the RSS feed and spread your podcast to the masses. And they do that by sending your podcast out to Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify, all these different places, Stitcher, Fathom, TuneIn, a lot of different podcast catchers out there. There are so many of them. You want to be on all of them. And the only way to really do that is to get a podcast host, because otherwise you would have to go individually submitting all of your feeds. A podcast host helps you do it automatically almost with all of them. And so if you have a podcast host, check. That's the third thing you need. So computer, microphone, headphones, that's equipment, check. Your hosting company, check, and your recording software, check. Right? If you have those three things, you can start. So easy barrier of entry. But what people often don't talk about is what happens next. Well, you have to create a show. You have to have an idea. You have to have a concept, a format. You need to also be able to understand that it takes work. So I think that's the part that a lot of people forget. While it's easy to start a podcast, it's not necessarily easy to continue it on if you don't have a plan and if you don't have at least a little bit of a budget so that you can make sure you pay for the things that you need. Like the next step would be a website to host your podcast, because you need a dedicated website with your own name, domain name. If you have an amazing idea and your podcast is kicking butt, I highly recommend that you trademark the name of your podcast. And that costs money, right? So there are these different levels that start to come in. Then if you want to actually have a good quality podcast, you need to be able to edit properly. And if you're not an editor yourself, hiring someone like a sound engineer would be a good start to at least get someone to clean up your audio and do some quick cuts and make sure that they blend in the music and they fix the levels so that everything sounds good, so that you don't have me speaking very loudly and then Gabrielle speaking very softly. That's super annoying when you have to like keep turning up and down the volume. So those are like ways that you can start leveling up, right? And then from then on, it gets complicated, because podcasting can be as complex as you want it to be. And one thing that I will say to end this part of the question is what my friend Evo Terra said yesterday on our live webinar for BIPOC podcast creators, which was podcasts tend to get the audience they deserve. If you're not getting an audience or your audience isn't growing, it has a lot to do with the fact that you're not putting out content that's really connecting with your audience. And that could be due to a lot of different things. It could be due to your technology issues. It could be due to editing. It could be due to production. It could be due to just lack of word of mouth or people recommending it, which is what he talked about yesterday. So there are many different things, but I think that effort is the main word that I would associate with a podcast. If you want to have a podcast, you need to put in the effort.
That is awesome advice. Thank you so much for that. I may want to look into an audio engineer myself, but anyway. um, but yes, you definitely sound like you've been in the game, and you've learned a lot from your many years. So let me ask you: do you see yourself continuing this? Is this a long-term goal, a short-term goal? What does the future hold for you?
I don't have a magic 8 ball, but that would be awesome if I could really know what the future held for me. So I will just say this: podcasting is a love affair for me now. It has become something that I'm really deeply connected with. I love the format. I love being able to tell stories in audio form. And now there are a lot of podcasts that are saying they want to have video components to them. So we're telling stories in both audio and video form for podcasting, which is very strange because podcasting started as only audio, right? So it's evolving, and I love that about it. It's growing. I'm definitely into podcasting, and I'm going to be in it for a long haul. We co-founded last year. My partner and I co-founded BIPOC Podcast Creators. Shout out to Tengia Renee Estrada. She's my partner at BIPOC Podcast Creators. And BIPOC Podcast Creators is a community of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in podcasting. It could be anyone who works in podcasting, creates a podcast, produces a podcast, hosts a podcast, or just is a hobbyist podcaster. Anyone that does anything to do with podcasting is welcome to join the community. We have a free community on Facebook, which will always be free. We will always have a free tier for the community. And then we also have events that we invite our community members to attend. We have webinars once a month. We have networkings. And we have a monthly newsletter that's super helpful because it gives you everything you need to know about podcasting that went on in that month. So we do like a recap of everything, like all the biggest news, headlines, and opportunities happening in podcasting that month. we do a recap. Instead of you having to read something every day, we just put it all in one digest, and it's once a month. So we do a lot of those kinds of things. Resources and opportunities are big for us. Networking is really big for us. And because, my passion is in podcasting, but it's also in storytelling, I just, it was a natural fit to create BIPOC podcast creators so that we could help advance and amplify the voices of people out here who are underrepresented.
Can you talk more about that? The fact that BIPOC, again, before I even get into that, can you explain the acronym?
But, oh yes, Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. That's what BIPOC stands for.
Okay. We got to educate people. All
Yes.
right.
And you can go to BIPOCpodcastcreators.com if you want to know more about what we do there.
Awesome. Awesome. So, all right. So now we go back. So people who are underrepresented, what is the significance of amplifying those voices? Like, it's like, why are you trying so hard? That's basically what I'm trying to ask.
Sometimes I ask myself that question. I'm just kidding. It's exhausting work, I tell you. I think the best way that I can answer that is, if you want to have diversity of thought in any kind of respect, whether it comes to storytelling or leadership or management, you need diverse people. You need people from different backgrounds and different experiences. And what we have learned in media over the past few years is that the media have made a lot of mistakes when it comes to the culture of it. So we've seen a lot of people who have been abused, who have been used, underpaid, all kinds of issues have been coming to the surface. And I do truly believe that a lot of it is due to a lack of thought, a lack of creative input from different types of people. So that's one reason that it's important to have diversity and representation in media. Another reason why it's important to have it is because you can't tell stories about us, people of color, without us. And that has been the narrative for many, many years, hundreds of years. People have been writing stories, books, making movies, or building radio shows around ideas that come from our cultures, but they're being written and produced by people who are white. And they can't really tell it the way that we can tell it. And they definitely misrepresent us in a lot of ways. And it's important for us to have our voices at the forefront of those stories. So that's another reason. It pushes culture forward when we get to actually have an opinion on the work that's being produced, and especially when it's being produced about us.
Right. So it's our faces that people are looking at. They're looking at our skin color. They're listening to our diction. The way that we talk, our mannerisms. We talk with our hands a lot. Like looking. They are looking at behaviors that are, trying to think of my words, that are not Anglo-Saxon, that are not European based, but they are more culturally based. So it's sort of, you're you're looking at what is specific to certain cultures, and you are showing something that people are not used to seeing.
Yeah, you could put it that way. You could put it in many different contexts. But at the end of the day, I think what really matters is, what are the stories that we want to tell and how do we want to represent them? And I think that to be responsible when it comes to storytelling, we have to bring equity and bring diversity with us. Otherwise, then we're just continuing the same narrative. We're not dismantling the old ideas of what the stereotypes might have been. We're not growing, we're not learning. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest problems that we have right now, is that we have become rather isolated in our way of thinking and in our communities. And so when you become isolated, you stop having empathy for people who are different from you or who have different experiences from you. And as storytellers, we have the capability to actually bring empathy out of people by displaying different stories by different people, by showing different sides of things, showing different sides of people and the multifaceted lives that some people live, right? And I think that we have that responsibility and we can do a lot with storytelling in that regard.
All right, all right, all right. So, so it's more. Let's. I'll ask you a more general question about podcasting. So, where, how can people start a podcast? What are the steps?
Well, I think we kind of talked about that already. We kind of gave the basics of the like what you need to start a podcast. What I would do next would be to at least have an editorial calendar. Create a calendar where you can write, okay, here's the topic that I'm going to talk about on the first episode. This is the topic I'm going to talk about on the next one, third one, fourth, fifth, blah 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 blah, going down, right? Decide how many episodes you're going to do in the first season of your podcast or in the first year of your podcast. Decide if you want to do a weekly episode, or maybe you want to do every other week, or maybe once a month. That's fine, but stick to a cadence so that your audience knows what to expect. Maybe you want to do a 10 episode run, like call it a mini series on a specific, very, very interesting topic, and then take a break. That's fine too. So you need to decide format. And I think that's one of the problems that a lot of people have. They don't think about format when they first start. So think about format. What do you want it to sound like? What do you want it to look like? Well, look like meaning like artwork, but also do some research by listening to other podcasts that are similar to the idea that you have, so that you can draw from them. Okay, here's what I like about this one. Here's what I don't like about this one. I could do this better. I could make this different. Put your own spin on it. Never ever copy, but it's okay to draw inspiration from other people. And another thing is make sure that you come up with a production schedule of some sort that allows you to have time to create the podcast. Like you need to build time in your day. So whether you're going to do maybe 1 hour a day or 5 hours on one day, you're going to sit down for 5 hours and only work on your podcast for those 5 hours. However you want to do it, you need to make sure that you build the time into your week, because I think that's another thing that a lot of people don't think about. They just start a podcast and then they forget that they have a life and they have jobs. In this study that came out this week from Sounds Profitable, it says that they did a study on podcast creators, and it says, I think it was like, I want to say significant percentage, like 90% of people who have a podcast work full time. Now, whether that means that they work full time on a podcast or they work full time and make a podcast, I'm not sure because it didn't define that. But 90% of people work full time, right? So the truth is, and from a lot of the creators that we serve at BIPOC Podcast Creators, I can tell you a lot of people, the majority of people that we talk to, have other jobs that they have to do besides their podcast. The podcast isn't necessarily their main source of income. And if that's the case for you, then you need to remember that you have to build time out of your day to create this podcast.
Hmm. Awesome, awesome. Um, but I think what I meant by my all everything you said was great. But in terms of when all that is done, we have your schedule, you have your topics, you have your calendar. Then what? Where do we host the podcast? What programs are out there? Where can people start?
Well, that's a big question because there are a lot of hosting companies out there that you can choose from. I'm not going to tell you which ones to choose. Instead, I'm going to tell you, think about the things that they might have that will serve you better for your show. So, let's say you have a show that you're going to have advertising on. So, if you have a show and you already have someone in mind who's going to be paying to advertise on your show, I would highly recommend that you go with a host that has the dynamic ad insertion service where you can drop in bytes of audio automatically and then remove them whenever you want to without having to re-record the entire episode or re-edit the episode, because that's really important. So that's a very important distinction. I think that's key if you already have advertising in mind for your show. If advertising is not something you're worried about right away, then you can keep it more simple. You can go with a hosting company that has solid amount of storage. That a lot of companies offer a certain variety of storage for your files. You need to have enough storage for all of your audio files to be stored with the hosting company. So make sure you look at storage. You want to look at pricing, I guess, but it depends on honestly, pricing is very like random. It's they're all very similar when it comes to pricing. So I would more so look at the features that you're wanting before you pick a host. And for me, like a combination of pricing, customer service, storage, and other features like what I just mentioned, like having dynamic ad insertion is really helpful. Everything else is just like whipped cream on the ice cream, or sprinkles, if you want to put it that way. So that's as far as I would go when it comes to how to pick a hosting company. Honestly, there a lot of them are very similar. I would say go with the one that feels the best for you and what you're trying to do with your show.
Hmm. Awesome, awesome. So now, what about growing listeners, gaining popularity? What's your advice for that? How do you grow in podcasting?
So you asked me that question earlier, and I was like, "This is a loaded question." And when I said that, I meant it, because the answer to that is like a lot of things. There are so many things you can do, and so many things that work, and others and many things that don't, and you'll just be spinning your wheels at. But I would say one of the best things that you can do to grow your podcast is to make your podcast easy to share. Meaning, how are people going to spread the word about your podcast? Are they going to share a link that has every available platform already on there that they can click on and listen with like one or two clicks? Make it very easy for them, because that's something that's called Podlink. There's a service called Podlink. It's free on a lot of tiers. You can put your podcast on there and then send this link out to people, and it has your episode on this page, right? This landing page, and you can either play it right there on your browser, or you can choose any of the player apps right below it, and it gives you a ton of different options for player apps. So if you're like an Android person and you love using Stitcher, you can press on Stitcher and it takes you right there to listen. Or maybe you're an Apple person and you want to use Apple Podcasts, click on the Apple Podcast icon, it takes you right there. It makes it very simple and easy to share the episode. So make it easy to share. Do it that way. You can make a landing page for your podcast. You can do your own website for your podcast. Make it easy to share. Okay. So that's step one, I think, when it comes to growth. And then also, another thing that you need to make sure you have is a good show. Because again, what I said before, that my friend Eva said yesterday, podcasts tend to get the audience they deserve. If you don't have a good show, it's going to be really hard to grow your show. You're competing with 4 million podcasts. Now, that doesn't necessarily seem like a lot when you're talking about how many books, magazines, and YouTube shows there are, but it is a lot when it comes to an audio format that's still growing. So, if you really want people to distinguish your show and like see it as something unique and different and worth listening to, then make a really good show. And the only really, I mean, there are many ways to do that, but if you don't put the effort in, like I said before, then it's going to be really hard to have a show that's worthy of a recommendation. So, making it easy to share, putting out a really great show, a well produced show that has thought and effort behind it. And also edit your show, please. Like, please put effort into making things more succinct, cut out sound bites that don't work, make things shorter that don't need to be there. There's a lot of unnecessary content that gets thrown out on podcasts that I'm like, I don't need to hear all of that. I already know that. You already said it. You could have said it in 2 words. So cut out the rest. We want to make sure that we give people the biggest reason to come back, which is content that's delivering something helpful to them or entertaining to them. Even the biggest podcasts out there that sound like they're super casual and easy and they're just like live to tape, they're not. I promise you. I've listened to a lot of them, and I know a lot of the producers who work on these shows. These shows are edited, and they're highly edited. So the more you can put, the more thought you can put to like the construction of your episodes, actually cutting out unnecessary things and making them, just bringing it down to what really matters, like the best of. That's how you'll have a better episode, and people will want to listen to it more and will come back for it because they'll know what to expect.
Thank you so much for that. I should be taking notes right now. Um, all right. So can you do you think podcasting is replacing our current media? I posed this to the previous people that talked about podcasting. Do you think it's replacing talk shows? Do you think it's replacing TV? Do you think it's uh, are more more of the youngins, are they turning to podcasting and turning away from television? Do you think it's replacing our current media?
That's a great question. I don't know that I can remember any stats right now that I've seen recently, um, of it replacing. Um, I will say that some social media sites like TikTok and YouTube are garnering a lot larger audiences. They're taking away some of those eyeballs from conventional television or radio, or they're taking away earlobes, I guess, from radio. See, this is the problem with doing things live. I can't cut that. um, if I was doing this on a podcast, I would definitely cut that part that I just said because it's irrelevant. But anyway, so is it taking away? I think it's taking away some audience, but I'm not sure that podcasting is quite there where we're replacing television or broadcast shows, or definitely not Netflix or those guys. But we are making a big dent and we're more complementary. If I don't know if you've noticed this, but there are a lot of TV shows out there now that have podcasts. Companion podcasts is what they call them.
I did notice that.
That's huge. Fresh Prince, or sorry, it's not called Fresh Prince. Bel Air, the remake of Fresh Prince, has a companion podcast. The Gilded Age on HBO has a companion podcast. Like all these shows have companion podcasts. Old shows, Scrubs, which I was an intern on in 2004, by the way, kind of a cool little side thing there. Scrubs was that's an old show. People were binging it during the beginning of the pandemic, and so they made a podcast to go with the binging of an old show. I mean, so honestly, I think podcasting is more of like the best friend of conventional media right now. It's not so much replacing, it's like the BFF that you have to be hanging out with to really get the full picture and full like effect and emotion behind the content.
So why do you think it's taking off? Why do you think it's so popular?
I think it's taking off with creators because it's an easy barrier of entry. It's low barrier of entry. So it's taking off with people who want to put their stories out there, which I think is fantastic, which is making it grow in the creation space. I think we went from like a million active shows in 2020 to 4 million now, and it's been 2 years. That's amazing. So that is really growing in the creation space. In listening, it's growing too. Actually, I just saw a report that in Canada, they're surpassing the amount of listening hours that we're having in the US. They're surpassing it in Canada. They're listening more to podcasts there, which is pretty amazing because the population there is smaller. So it's interesting that like maybe because the population is smaller, they don't have as many conventional TV shows. I don't know, but that doesn't make sense because they would have Netflix and other things like that. See, this is another thing that I would cut in a podcast episode. So anyway, but what I'm trying to say is like I think that it's growing in listenership. I know by the numbers that it is growing in listenership. The podcasting medium is, but there is still a significant part of the population in the world, the global population, that doesn't listen to podcasts or doesn't really understand what a podcast is. And our job as podcast creators is to continue to educate the global population about podcasting and the option to listen to podcasts. Because I think that's the other thing that we're kind of forgetting sometimes. Sometimes the Western world creators, we forget that there's a whole nother world out there that's much bigger than us.
Yeah, yeah. So I just got a comment here. Um, you were talking about cutting out your comments. This one from Jan. Hi, Jan. She said I wouldn't cut that comment. It shows your humor and personality. So that's why I
Thanks,
do this
man.
live, right? You gotta get get my guests on their toes. All right, awesome, awesome. All right, so I know we're having so much fun, but we gotta wind down. Um, so do you have any final words of wisdom that you would like to share with the audience?
You put me on the spot. I don't know. What kind of wisdom can I share? I mean, is it life wisdom? Is it podcast wisdom? I guess it should be podcast wisdom since that's what we're talking about. Um, Words of podcasting wisdom. Okay, here's something. There are a lot of experts out there or people who call themselves experts. Here's what I would say: try to stick to the advice of one or two first. Like, go follow one or two that, and then follow their advice only for 6 months and see how that works. Track it, track like your before. And then once you started doing what they said you should do and implementing that, track what happens after that. Then make decisions on whether or not you should listen to what other experts are saying or somebody else is saying. But if you do what everybody's saying and start to apply little things from everybody in every corner that you get advice from, you're going to drive yourself nuts and you're going to be exhausted. So if you are going to listen to someone, try to at least like narrow it down to one or two people and then only do that advice for a few months while tracking it. And then also be very discerning about the people that you listen to on the internet, because there are a lot of people out there who I like to call fake experts, and they say that they're experts, but they really don't have a track record. So when you meet somebody or read about somebody who says that they can do this or that for you in podcasting, make sure you research them, Google them, ask around. There are many places like BIPOC podcast creators where you can go in there and say, hey, does anybody know this person? They offered me the service. What do you know about them? Or try to connect with someone who can be recommended to you instead of just going with a stranger, especially when it comes to spending your money.
And you mentioned life advice. Do you want to share that as well?
Life advice. Oh my God. Right now, in this world that we're living in, I would say that my biggest advice is to not forget our humanity. We're Don't forget that we all have a heart and, blood running through our veins. Don't forget humanity. Don't forget the fact that we need to care about each other and stop being so selfish. Um, have some empathy. Try to put yourself in other people's shoes. Understand what they have to go through. Reach out, have a conversation, listen instead of talking sometimes. That helps too.
Beautiful, beautiful. That is the best advice ever. Thank you so much, Maribel, for joining me today. And let me put up your promo banner here. All right, you guys. So Maribel, she is on all over the social media, you guys. So she BIPOC podcast creators, what she referenced a few times. They have a Facebook group and a Facebook page. So I encourage you guys to check that out. She herself is on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, and she got her email address. So if you want to send her an email, please send her an email. All of this information is on your screen for those of you watching this right now. And for those of you listening, all of this will be in the description. So don't worry if you forgot. All of this information will be provided to you in one way or another. Can you talk about BIPOC podcast creators?
BIPOC Podcast Creators is a community that we created last year to help amplify the voices and stories of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in podcasting. That's what the word BIPOC stands for. And so we created an organization to do that. We provide resources, we do monthly webinars, we offer networkings, we have events. So you can join the community for free on Facebook, ask any questions you have, communicate, network, share things on there. And then you can also attend some of our events with some of them are free and some of them are paid. and we have monthly things happening. So also make sure you sign up for the newsletter if you want to know what's happening in the podcasting world in general.
And how can people sign up for your newsletter?
So go to bipocpodcastcreators.com and click on sign up for newsletter, or you can also click on join us and learn more about the membership on the group.
Awesome. A question just came to me. Is your is your group, your website, is it only for BIPOC, or can white people be involved as well? So I'm always curious when I see things that are geared toward people of color. Like, is it just for that audience, or
The,
are you opening up to?
the BIPOC podcast creators membership is only for people who identify as Black, Indigenous, or a person of color. It is not my job to come to you and say, you don't look like a person of color, or you don't look Black, or you don't look. I will never do that because I've been done that too many times. I've been told I don't look Mexican many times. And I know how hurtful that can be. And that's not for me to decide. I don't know what your life experience has been. So we let our membership decide when they apply to be a member. If they identify, then they're welcome to join. If they do not identify as a BIPOC person, they are more than welcome to sign up for our newsletter and receive our updates. They're also we also have events that are open to anybody. So like our monthly webinars are open to anyone who wants to take them. Some of our networkings, like the one we're having at Podcast Movement in Dallas, is open to anyone who supports the amplification of voices of BIPOC people in podcasting, but it's centered around celebrating BIPOC people in podcasting. So it's, we'll the people who will speak will be BIPOC people. It'll be focused on that. But yes, we have some things that are open to anybody.
All right, awesome. So you guys heard that, right? So if you're interested, whatever you, however you identify, definitely reach out. So you could go to BIPOC podcast. I gotta say this slowly. I'm sorry. It's
Okay.
BIPOC podcast creators.com. If you want to go to their website to learn more, to sign up for their newsletter. And again, they have a Facebook group, they have a Facebook page, and Maribel herself is on Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn. I'm missing
Instagram.
something, and Instagram, yes. And you can also email her as well. So again, all of that information is on the screen if you are viewing this, and if you are listening to this, it is in the description. And I encourage you to just go to all of her accounts and just follow her on all of her accounts. And if you want to learn more about BIPOC podcast creators, go to the websites BIPOC podcast creators.com. All right, Maribel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Gabrielle. It was a pleasure.
Awesome, awesome. I know you got to run, so I won't keep you. Thank you for coming. All right, you guys, it is now my turn. Okay, so, oh, my door just opened. Okay, okay, it closed again. Okay, so you guys, we have reached the conclusion of our episode. Thank you so much for joining us today. So, whether you are watching this on video or you are listening to this on audio, I encourage you to follow us. I encourage you to subscribe to us. Um, give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Okay, there you are. So wherever you are taking my voice in right now, whatever platform that is, I encourage you to check out our other episodes, and don't forget to follow and subscribe. And while you're at it, let us know what you thought about this episode by leaving a comment in the comment section or in the comment thread. I, Gabrielle, would love to hear your thoughts about this episode. And as a reminder, this podcast is a production of A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. So if you would like to learn more about us, the things that we have to offer, the services that we offer, if you're looking for tutoring for yourself or for your child, please reach out to us. Our website is www.astepaheadtutoringservices.com. And I also want to share that when you reach out to us and you mention that you heard about us from Hot Topics, we will give you 15% off 6 hours of tutoring. I am going to repeat that. When you reach out to us and you say, hey, I heard about you from that Hot Topic show, we will give you 15% off 6 hours of tutoring. So that should be an incentive for you to seek tutoring services from us, of course. And I encourage you to sign up for our email list and our texting list. That information is scrolling below at the bottom of your screen for our viewers, and for our listeners, that information is in the description. So you will receive, sorry, it's raining now. I told you I get easily distracted. Um, what was my thought? I forgot my thoughts. Yes, email and texting list. Yes. So you will receive exclusive promotions, discounts, offers when you sign up for that email list, when you sign up for that texting list. I encourage you to do that. That information is at the bottom of your screen for our viewers, and for our listeners, that information is in the description. Okay, I am going to share this last message before I officially conclude.
Hey there, have you heard of us? We're a small team of tutors here at A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. We believe that education and information should be accessible to everyone, regardless of income, race, or creed. We're dedicated to making this happen, but we need your help. Please consider making a donation to our company. No amount is too small. Your donation will allow us tutors to remain employed, offer free and low-cost services, put on productions like this web series, and reach out to families nationwide. With your help, we can tackle the academic challenges of our students and the emotional, mental, and behavioral changes that result from these challenges. As a bonus, we can improve our communities in the process. Support us today. Send your donation by Cash App to $ASATS 2013, by PayPal or Venmo to @ASATS 2013, or by Zelle to success@astepaheadtutoringservices.com. For our Facebook Live viewers, you can also send us a star. Your support means a lot to us. Please note, we're a for-profit company. We're not a charity. Your donation may not be tax deductible. Please consult a tax professional.
All right, you guys. I'm sorry. I'm easily distracted again. All right, we are done, you guys. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I look forward to seeing you at the next episode. And now, I am signing off. Bye.